My feet were killing me. That was the first, last, and only coherent thought I'd had for the past 3 hours. 24 years old, and my arches felt like they were 90. This was my penance for pulling a double 8 hours at the diner starting at 6 a.m. And now this, a temp catering gig at the Halcyon Pier Pavilion. Gennady, my husband, thought I was asleep. The lie tasted like the stale coffee I'd chugged in the alley between shifts. My concealer was a lost cause, a thin, failing barrier against the purple puffiness under my eyes. This place, the Pavilion, was another world. The event was the Blue Currents Gala, thrown by Kincaid Thermal Systems. Big tech, big money, big talk about saving the ocean by drilling into it. The main hall was drenched in these pulsing, deep blue LED lights, designed to make the whole place look like a giant, futuristic fish tank. It just made everyone look cold, their expensive jewelry glittering like fishing lures. I was trying to be invisible. It's the first rule of high-end service. We are the hands that deliver the glass, not the people attached to them. But Table 12, the main VIP booth, was making that impossible. Bryce Kincaid. Even if I hadn't been briefed, I'd know the name. Everyone in Port Orpheus knew the Kincaid heir. He and his half-dozen friends, already loud and glossy with booze I couldn't pronounce, were treating the staff like personal entertainment. They were live streaming on some new app. Boosting the brand, one of them kept yelling. Their phones were constantly up, panning across the room, zooming in on waitresses, making snide comments about the kitchen staff. We were just background characters for their engagement. I was balancing a tray of pearl divers, heavy crystal coupes, sticky pineapple and rum concoctions. I was navigating the main floor when it happened. The marble was wet, someone else's spill. A ghost of a footprint, my heel. A standard issue black pump. Skidded. Just a millimeter, but it was enough. The tray tilted. It was like those nightmares where you fall, but in slow motion. I saw the golden yellow liquid arc through the blue air. A perfect glittering curve destined for one place. Bryce Kincaid's bright white dinner vest. Silence. The kind of silence that's louder than a bomb. Then a roar. Not anger. Laughter. Clip it! Oh my God, Chad, did you get that clip it now? A girl with diamonds in her ears shrieked, her phone shaking in her hand. My blood turned to ice. I'm so sorry, sir, I stammered, grabbing for napkins. The floor, it was wet. Bryce looked down at the dark, spreading stain. He looked up at me. His eyes were bright, buzzing. This wasn't a problem for him. This was content. It's fine, he slurred, a grin spreading across his face as he looked right into his friend's camera. We needed a prop for the next bit anyway. A prop, I whispered. He reached into a designer swag bag sitting by his chair. We got these in the kit, for viral moments. He pulled out a set of clippers, cordless, black plastic, with some stupid tech logo on the side. A prank kit, the bag said. Hold still, he commanded. Before I could back away, his hand shot out. He wasn't gentle. He grabbed a thick handful of my black hair, yanking my head to the side. The grip was shockingly tight. I smelled the gin on his breath. Bryce, don't, one of the girls said, but she was giggling, her own phone already recording. The buzzing started. It was loud, invasive. It vibrated straight through my skull, drowning out the smooth jazz from the stage. He ran it straight up the center of my head, from the nape of my neck, where my hair was pinned up. Right over the crown, I felt the awful resistance of the thick hair, then the cold, sharp bite of the metal against my scalp. It burned. The table exploded. Flashes went off like paparazzi. Phones everywhere, a forest of them, all pointed at me, capturing every second of my humiliation. I was frozen. I couldn't breathe. I could feel the air from the vents, impossibly cold on the newly bare strip of my skin. My eyes darted to the main entrance. Peterson, the venue's head of security, was standing there. Our eyes met. He looked away. He just stood there, arms crossed, watching. Of course he did. They were the Kincaids, I was just the temp. Bryce let go, stepping back to admire his work. He held the clippers up to his live stream, laughing. That's how you handle a spill, folks. A thick, inky lock of my hair, severed and dead, drifted onto my shoulder. It clung to the cheap polyester of my uniform for a second before falling to the floor. My hand, shaking, reached for it. My fingers closed around the silky, heavy weight. A sob burned in my throat, hot and acidic. I swallowed it. I would not cry. I would not give them the tears. I would not be the crying girl in their viral clip. The house band, oblivious or uncaring, shifted into a bright, cheerful swing number. The sound of the trumpets felt obscene, a grotesque attempt to paint over the raw, exposed wound of the moment. And then, the massive 12-foot-high glass doors to the promenade swung open. The cold, wet air of the Port Orpheus night rushed in, cutting through the fog of perfume and champagne. Gennady. My heart didn't just stop. It seized. He was here. He was supposed to be in a logistics meeting across the river until midnight. He was wearing his long, dark wool coat, the collar turned up against the wind. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't moving fast. He just moved. He walked between the tables, a shark in the fish tank. His eyes, the color of wet cement, were perfectly calm. They scanned the room, absorbing the blue lights, the laughing table, the frozen security guard, and then me. He saw the buzzing clippers in Bryce's hand. He saw the stark, white line on my head. He saw the lock of my hair clutched in my fist. No one here knew. We'd kept our marriage quiet for almost a year. It was my choice. I didn't want to be Mrs. Zharkov, a name that echoed in the parts of the city people didn't talk about. I just wanted to be Lila, the girl paying her dues. Now Lila was just a joke with bad hair. He reached me. He didn't even glance at Bryce. He unwrapped the heavy, gray cashmere shawl from his own neck. It was warm from his body and smelled like cedar in the cold night air. He draped it over my shoulders, pulling the soft wool up over my head, covering the damage, shielding my face. His hand found my elbow, strong and steady, lifting me from my frozen crouch. His other hand, broad and calloused, moved up, palm out, completely covering the lens of the nearest phone. The guy holding it actually recoiled. Gennady leaned in. His lips brushed the shell of my ear, his voice a low vibration, for me only. "Stand behind me, Lila." I stumbled back, clutching the shawl. He turned. The venue manager, a guy named Harris, was finally rushing over, his face pale and wringing his hands. "Sir, I apologize for the commotion. Gennady didn't raise his voice. He never raised his voice. "Harris, turn off the music. Bring the house lights to 100% now." Harris blinked, terrified. "Sir, the gala? Now." The manager ran. A second later, the swing music died with a scratch. The room was plunged into a sudden, jarring silence. Then, the flattering blue LEDs snapped off, replaced by the stark, unforgiving white glare of the overhead maintenance lights. Every flaw, every stain, every guilty face was exposed. Gennady's voice, now for the room, was still quiet, but it owned every molecule of air. "Bryce Kincaid." Bryce, caught in the white light, was still smiling, but it was faltering. "Do I know you, buddy?" "You signed a venue contract," Gennady stated, his tone flat, informational. "Section 4, subparagraph B. It guarantees the physical and psychological safety of all venue personnel. You are in breach." "Hey, man, it was just a joke," one of the friends slurred, finally lowering his phone. "I require the original footage from that device," Gennady said, pointing to the friend, "and a list of the names of everyone at this table." This time, Bryce laughed. It was a short, ugly, drunken bark. "You require? Who the hell are you, the fun police, Gennady didn't answer. He didn't even look at him. He just lifted 2 fingers of his left hand, a barely perceptible gesture aimed at the dark service hallway behind the bar. 4 men, dark suits, dark ties, earpieces. They weren't the lazy venue security I knew. These men were different. Solid, they emerged from the shadows. They didn't run. They just appeared. They moved like water flowing around rocks. 2 going to the friends, 2 flanking Bryce. They didn't grab anyone. They didn't touch. They just created a physical barrier, an imposing human wall separating the group, moving them back with gentle, insistent, terrifying pressure. Bryce stopped laughing. He looked suddenly sober. Gennady took 1 step closer to him. He didn't point at Bryce. He tilted his chin toward the large, elegant gold leaf logo of the Pavilion Trust etched into the marble wall high above the bar. "You're in my house." The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum. The Kincaids were kings of Port Orpheus tech, but the Pavilion Trust owned the waterfront, the docks, the venues, the shipping lanes, and the man who ran the trust, the man no one ever saw, was my husband. Gennady turned his back on Bryce Kincaid. He walked to me, his arm wrapping around my waist, pulling me tight against his side. He shielded me from the hundreds of watching eyes, guiding me toward the private staff exit. At the door, he paused. He looked over his shoulder, not at Bryce, but at the trembling manager, Harris. "Every check tonight is covered by my account." Then, his eyes found Bryce, pinning him in the harsh white light. "As for the debt, we'll let the city's rules handle that." The heavy door clicked shut behind us, leaving the entire gala in stunned, silent tableau. I looked back, just for a second, through the one-way glass of the door. I saw Bryce Kincaid, still standing by the table. He had a bizarre, fixed smile on his face, but it wasn't reaching his eyes. He looked like a man who had just realized the joke was on him, and he had no idea what the punchline was going to be. The ride up in the private elevator was silent. The only sound was the hydraulic hum, a stark contrast to the echoing chaos we'd left behind. Gennady hadn't said a word since we'd stepped out of the pavilion's service exit and into the back of his waiting car. He just held my hand, his thumb resting on my knuckle, solid and warm. I kept the cashmere shawl pulled tight over my head, a flimsy hood against the world. Our penthouse was dark when we walked in, the floor-to-ceiling windows showing Port Orpheus glittering like a bed of scattered diamonds below. The bay was a sheet of black glass. It was our sanctuary, the one place the city couldn't touch us. Tonight, it felt like the glass was about to shatter. I walked straight to the master bathroom, shedding the shawl, my cheap polyester uniform, and my shoes. I stood in front of the vast mirror, staring at the damage. The white light of the gala had been harsh, but this was worse. The vanity lights were unforgiving. A stark white pink stripe, maybe an inch wide, ran from my nape to my crown. It was uneven, choppy, a violation. My hands were shaking, not from the cold. It was the phantom vibration. I could still feel the buzz of the clippers, a ghostly echo against my skull. I opened a drawer and took out the sharp, heavy shears I used for trimming. I looked at my reflection. The girl staring back was 24 years old, her face puffy from exhaustion and held back tears, her hair defiled. I took a deep breath. I gathered the long, black strands on one side and cut, snip. The sound was clean, finite. I did the other side. My hair, once almost to my waist, now fell in jagged pieces into the marble sink. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. Gennady appeared in the doorway. He didn't say, "Are you okay?" He never asked questions like that. He knew I wasn't. He didn't say, "Let me help." He knew this was something I had to do myself. He just walked past me, set a small, leather-backed vanity mirror on the counter, placed a handful of bobby pins next to it, and laid out a warm, damp towel. Then he left. A minute later, he returned and placed a steaming mug of hot cocoa on the marble. The rich, dark smell filled the room. He stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, just watching, not with pity, with presence. I picked up the shears again and started the real work, evening out the back, trying to shape the ragged edges into something deliberate, a bob, maybe no, shorter. The damaged stripe was too high. I just kept cutting, focusing on the sound of the metal, trying to make it overwrite the electric buzz. My phone, discarded on the counter, lit up. Then again and again it began to vibrate, a frantic, angry buzzing that sounded too much like the clippers. I stopped cutting, my breath catching. "Don't," Gennady said, his voice quiet. I picked it up anyway. It was everywhere. Port Orpheus Gala fail. Kincaid airs wild prank. Waitress gets shocking makeover. The clip, the one I'd felt being filmed, it was only 45 seconds long. The angle was from Bryce's table. You could see my heel slide, the perfect arc of the golden liquid, the shock on my face, then Bryce, laughing, pulling out the clippers. The sound was horribly clear. The buzz, the roar of his friends, the flashbulbs, my hand, frozen, reaching up. It was trending. 10,000 views, 50,000, 100,000. The comments were a waterfall of poison and pity. "OMG, he's hilarious. She totally deserved it. Spilling on him like that. That's assault. Someone call the cops. Poor girl. She looks like she's gonna die. She's probably gonna sue and get rich. Lucky. What a gold digger setup. I'd hide my face for a year. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to crawl out of my own skin. They were all there, in that ballroom. But now they were also here, in my bathroom. Thousands of them, pointing and laughing. Gennady took the phone from my numb hand. He powered it off and set it face down. "Finish your hair, Lila," he said, his voice soft, but with an edge I knew. He wasn't my husband right now. He was the other thing, the man who ran the Pavilion Trust, the man whose name, Zharkov, made certain people in this city nervous. He walked into his study, the one I rarely entered, and shut the door. I turned back to the mirror, my vision blurring. I finished the cut, my hands slick with sweat. It was short, a severe, almost ragged pixie cut. It exposed my neck, my ears. It made me look raw. I heard his voice, muffled through the heavy door. It was never loud, but it was precise. I could only catch phrases. "Call legal at the trust." "Yes, Mark, breach of contract, Section 4, full damages. And I want the security footage from every camera in that hall. I don't care what time it is." A pause. Then I heard him on another call. "Roman, activate the Maritime Logistics Compliance Team. I want a full audit of Kincaid Thermal's shipping manifests for the last 6 months. Every single one, check them against the Harbor Authority declarations. Look for discrepancies. Small ones. Very small ones." He was using his daylight tools. Zharkov Maritime Logistics, the Pavilion Trust, his legitimate empires. But he was aiming them like weapons. I finished cleaning the sink, my movements robotic. I gathered the severed locks of my hair, the long pieces I'd cut, and the single, humiliating stripe Bryce had taken. I walked into the bedroom and found a small, empty glass box, one I usually kept earrings in. I placed the hair inside. I closed the lid. It wasn't for them. It wasn't for social media. It was for me, an artifact of the insult. The study door opened. Gennady emerged, his tie loosened, his suit jacket gone. He looked at me, at the box, at my new hair. "Lila, you're doing it," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "You're doing that." He didn't pretend not to understand. "I'm stopping the bleeding." "I'm scared, Gennady." It was the truest thing I'd said all night. I'm scared of them, and I'm scared of the shadow. Your shadow, the mafia stuff. I don't want that. I don't want men in dark coats fixing my problems. He walked to me, his face unreadable. He didn't deny the past I'd only ever heard rumors about. He never did. "I don't have a family. Lila, I don't have a syndicate." "No," he said, his voice low. "What I have is a past. And I've spent the last 10 years building my own laws, legitimate laws, rules for my city, my property, my people." He broke my rules, and he hurt my person. "I want to be the one to speak," I insisted, my voice stronger than I felt. It was my head, my humiliation, but I'm terrified they'll just turn me into a symbol. The poor waitress, the victim. "Then you won't be," he said. He sat on the edge of the bed, pulling me down gently to sit beside him. "Let me freeze the dirty hands first. Let me stop the machine that's trying to make money off your pain. I will use the law, my law. when they are immobilized, when they can't spin the story, then you decide. You decide who you want to be. You decide what you want to say. He looked me straight in the eye. But we agree on the principles. No blood, no violence. We do not threaten families. We do not touch outsiders. We use the system he trusts, and we turn it against him. I nodded, my throat tight. Just finance, legal, contracts. Contracts, he affirmed. And to be clear, he added, you get final approval. Nothing goes public, not from the trust, not from me, not about this incident without your signature. He was giving me the power back, not just over my hair, but over the story. Later, we lay in the dark. The city lights were muted. The storm of the night was settling into a cold, heavy dread. I couldn't sleep. I could feel my pulse hammering in my wrists, in my throat. Gennady rolled onto his side. He didn't pull me into an embrace. He just laid his large, warm hand over my wrist. His fingers found the vein, the frantic pulse. He didn't say anything. He just held it, his thumb stroking the skin, steadying the rhythm. It was an old ritual from my worst anxiety nights, his quiet way of anchoring me, of counting my heartbeats back to stillness. 1, 2, 3, 4. I focused on his touch, not the phantom buzz. When I woke, it was just before dawn. The harbor was invisible, shrouded in a thick gray fog. Gennady was already dressed, standing by the window, sipping an espresso. I have to go to work, he said. I sat up. The glass box with my hair was on the nightstand. Gennady, I said, my voice clear in the quiet room, don't make me the excuse. He turned, his silhouette dark against the gray light. He nodded, a slow, deliberate motion. No, Lila, you're not the excuse. You're the reason. I watched from the window as his black car, sleek and silent, pulled away from the curb 20 stories below. It disappeared into the fog, a shark heading into the deep. On the glass, my own reflection stared back at me, my short hair, my tired eyes. I looked down at the box, the evidence. He had his promise. I made my own. This time, I wouldn't just be saved, I would be heard. For the first 48 hours, I barely left the penthouse, not out of fear, exactly, but out of a strange, suspended animation numbness. Gennady had turned our home, my sanctuary, into something else. It was a command center, a quiet, carpeted, glass-walled war room. He didn't hide his work from me. He honored his promise. He treated me as a partner, laying out the battlefield of Port Orpheus as if it were a map on the dining room table. There are 4 players on this board. Lila, he explained on the second morning, pushing a cup of coffee toward me. I hadn't slept. My new, short hair felt strange against the pillow, bristly and unfamiliar. First, Mar, he said, there's Kincaid Thermal Systems, KTS. They're new money, tech money. They think they own the city because they have the most cash. They're loud. They're sloppy. He gestured out the window toward the bay. Then there's the Port Orpheus Harbor Authority. Old money. Bureaucrats. They own the water, the docks, the regulations. They're slow, and they're susceptible to KTS's cash. He tapped his own chest. Third, there's my Pavilion Trust. We own the infrastructure, the land, the venues, like the Halcyon. We lease to people like KTS. We are the house they were in. And fourth, I asked. His expression became more complex. The fourth isn't one player. They're the gray suits, the ones who watch everyone. The Atlantic Securities Commission, the ASC, they watch the money. And the Metropolitan Integrity Bureau, the MIBR, they watch the city officials, the police, the Harbor Authority. They're supposed to keep the game clean. He paused. They watch me, too. So everything we do must be perfectly, boringly legal. This was the world he moved in, not of guns and dark alleys, but of audits and regulatory oversight. It was colder, somehow more calculating. That afternoon, a woman named Mara Ionescu came to the penthouse. She was sharp, dressed in a practical blazer, and had eyes that didn't miss a thing. She wasn't a lawyer. She was an independent investigative journalist, the kind who published on subscription-only sites and was famously unbuyable. Gennady didn't hire her. He exchanged. "Mara," he said, offering her tea, which she accepted. "I just sat on the sofa, watching. You've been looking into KTS's media engagement for your story on tech inflation, correct?" She nodded, her gaze cautious. "I have." "You should look at the Blue Currents gala stream," Gennady said, not mentioning me. "Look at the numbers. KTS is claiming 2 million unique viewers on their new app." "That's high," Mara said, sipping her tea. "My data team," Gennady said, "ran a simple server analysis. The app's architecture couldn't have handled more than 200,000 concurrent connections without catastrophic failure, and it didn't fail." Mara's eyes lit up. She put her cup down. "They're buying engagement, bot farms." "I wouldn't know," Gennady said smoothly. "I just provide venue services, but a good journalist would probably trace the payments for that bot farm, and that journalist might find which media company KTS hired to boost engagement." "And what do you get, Gennady?" she asked, her voice like flint. "Symmetrical information. You find something, you share it with me. I find something, I share it with you. You publish what you can prove. I use what I can prove." "And the waitress?" she asked, looking at me for the first time. "The waitress," Gennady said, his voice dropping half a degree, "is a private citizen who was assaulted on my property. My legal team is handling the breach of contract. That's a separate matter." Mara stood up. "I'll look at the server logs." After she left, I watched Gennady get on the phone with his own people. He called Roman, his head of maritime logistics, and Mark, his chief counsel for the trust. "Roman, I want that audit on KTS's harbor manifests, but I want to be clear," he said, his voice firm, echoing in the quiet study. "This is a financial and legal offensive only. Do you understand? No one goes to anyone's house. No one makes a threatening call. No one gets leaned on. We find the paper trail. We use the law. I will not have any street-level nonsense jeopardize this. We are clean, 100%. He was calming his team, but he was also reassuring me. He then hired a team I'd never heard of, not private eyes, a legal data forensics group, data accountants. He called them. They weren't cheap. He tasked them with one thing: follow the money from KTS to the media company Mara was investigating. Within 24 hours, they found it, a shell company called Harbor Drift LLC. And Harbor Drift was funded by, of all things, a KTS public charity, the Sea Glass Initiative. Gennady showed me the file on his tablet. "This is their community outreach fund," he said, his voice tight with a controlled anger I was beginning to recognize. He scrolled down. "And look here. A line item, guest experience enhancement, an expense for promotional prank kits. The Clippers. They had put the Clippers on an expense report. They had monetized my humiliation." I felt the hot cocoa I'd just drunk rise in my throat. "This," Gennady said, his finger tapping the screen, "is arrogance, and this is the leverage." But he was already moving past it. "He's just the son. Lila, this." He pulled up a new file. "Is the father. This is the real prize." It was a KTS proposal to the Port Orpheus Harbor Authority, a multi-million-dollar plan to lay deep-sea thermal exchange pipes, right under the historic quay, Gennady murmured. "The Harbor Authority has been dragging its feet. The environmental reports are vague." He picked up his phone. Roman checked the wording on KTS's impact report. Find out who signed off on that adjusted safety data. While he built his case, I was going stir-crazy. I finally put on a beanie, pulled the collar of my jacket up, and went for a walk, just to breathe air that wasn't recycled. The city felt different. People looked at me. Or maybe I just thought they did. Then, near the diner I used to work at, I saw it. Sprayed on a brick wall in clean, simple black letters, "See the server." Not my name, not justice for Lila. Just see the server, see the person, a quiet call for respect. I didn't know who did it, but it was the first time I hadn't felt completely alone. That small bit of strength shattered when I got back and, in a moment of weakness, turned my phone on. The The vitriol was still there, but so was something new. Bryce Kincaid. He was on a boat, grinning into his camera, tanned and unbothered. He was holding a new pair of clippers. This pair plated in gold. "Wow, you guys," he laughed, the wind whipping his perfect hair. "The media is going crazy over a harmless joke. People need to lighten up. Am I right? It's just hair. People are so sensitive. It's pulling insane engagement on the app. Though keep it up." The video had over 1 million views. The comments were a battlefield. Thousands of downvotes or angry face emojis. But as he said, it was engagement. It was all just content to him. I shut the phone off, my hands shaking again. "He's still doing it," I whispered when Gennady found me in the kitchen. "Let him," Gennady said. He was strangely calm. He was organizing file folders on the counter. "He's a fool, and he's loud. He's drawing attention. He thinks he's winning the media cycle. We aren't in the media cycle. We're in the financial cycle." I went to my room. I took out the journal I hadn't touched in months. I opened to a fresh page and wrote, "I am not a victim. I am the central witness." I wrote down everything I remembered: the smell of gin, the sound of the buzzing, the click of the phone flashes, the way Peterson, the guard, looked away. I wasn't a girl who got her hair cut. I was a person building a case. 3 days later, the quiet crack Gennady had been waiting for finally came. He was on a conference call with Mark, his lawyer, the speaker on. I was reading on the sofa. "Gennady," Mark said, his voice crisp. "You were right. The ASC just put an internal-only flag on the Sea Glass initiative, the guest experience payout. It's not public. It's just a preliminary query. They smell the smoke, but they don't know where the fire is. They're looking at it as potential misuse of charitable funds." Gennady closed his eyes for a brief second. He looked not happy, but satisfied, like a chess piece had just landed exactly where he'd predicted. "They haven't announced it," he said. "No," Mark confirmed. "They won't. Not until they have something solid. It's just an internal marker." "Good," Gennady said. "That's exactly what we need." He hung up the phone and looked at me. The calculated calm was gone, replaced by a sharp, focused intensity. "He's been playing for the cameras," Gennady said, walking over to me. "Now, we build him a stage he can't control." I couldn't just witness. Not anymore. Gennady was moving his pieces across the city, a quiet grandmaster of finance and law. He was building his stage, as he called it, but that was his fight. I was staring at the glass box on my nightstand, the one holding the shorn-off lock of my hair. He was freezing the hands that had done the damage. I needed to give voice to the tremor. I didn't go back to the trending videos. I went to a place I knew, a place I trusted. Backroom Voices. It's an anonymous forum for service industry workers, a digital alleyway where we trade horror stories, warn each other about bad managers, and share tips on getting Cabernet stains out of white linen. I opened a new thread. Subject: the gala, the spill, and the clippers. I didn't use my name. I didn't use Bryce's name. I didn't even name the halcyon. I wrote about what it felt like to be 24 years old and feel like you're 90 because you're on hour 16 of a double shift. I wrote about the sick, hollow feeling in your stomach when a tray starts to slip. And I wrote about the sound, the buzz. I wrote about the feeling of cold air on a newly bare strip of scalp. I wrote about the heat of a dozen flashbulbs. I wrote about looking at the face of the security guard the man paid to protect the room and seeing him deliberately look away. I ended the post, all 500 words of it, with one simple line. My hands were shaking when I spilled that drink. Please, don't laugh when their hands shake. I closed the laptop and walked away. I expected nothing. Maybe a few hang in there or what a jerk comments. By the next morning, my private messages on the forum had exploded. It wasn't pity. It was a deluge. It was a confession box. A bartender from an uptown hotel describing a finance bro who jokingly filmed her bending over to get a bottle from the well. A line cook from a downtown steakhouse telling me about a table of influencers who sent back a perfectly good steak 3 times, harassing him, just to get a reaction video for their stream. A hotel maid who'd had her cart upended because a prankster wanted to see what would happen. They were all like me. They had been turned into props, into content. I called my best friend, Ari Mendoza. Ari's a barista at a cafe near the docks, smart as a whip, and takes nonsense from exactly no one. "Ari," I said, my voice thick, "I think I accidentally started something." "Good," he replied, the sound of a steam wand hissing in the background. "What is it?" I read him the messages. He was silent for a full minute, the espresso machine his only response. "Okay," he said finally. "So we're building a union, or something like it. What are we calling it?" "I don't know," I said. I keep thinking about how we're supposed to be quiet, invisible, the apron we wear." "The Quiet Apron," Ari said. The name landed, instantly perfect. We met at his cafe after his shift, the place smelling like burnt coffee and cinnamon. We bought a domain name for $12. Ari knew a couple of law students at the local university who needed pro bono hours. We set up a simple, anonymous hotline using a secure messaging app. We found a martial arts instructor willing to teach a free, soft self-defense and de-escalation class, not how to fight, but how to break a grip, how to use your voice, how to create space. Within a week, the Quiet Apron was a real thing. It was small, it was shaky, and it was built on nothing but shared frustration, but it was ours. The graffiti "See the Server" had been painted over, but the sentiment was already out. A small chain of waterfront restaurants places Gennadi's trust didn't own put up small, polite, laminated signs by their host stands, "We do not tolerate the harassment or humiliation of our staff. Violators will be asked to leave." It was a start. Then, the local news called the Penthouse. They wanted an interview. They wanted the victim. They wanted the tears, the drama, the mystery husband rumors. I looked at Gennadi. He was at the breakfast bar, reading a stack of shipping manifests, his focus absolute. "It's your signature. Lila," he said, not looking up from a highlighted discrepancy. "Your choice. Your stage." I took the call. "I'll do it," I told the producer, my heart hammering. "On one condition. You give me 3 minutes uninterrupted. I will not say Bryce Kincaid's name. I will not talk about the money. I will only talk about the Quiet Apron." They argued, they pushed, but they smelled an exclusive, and they finally, reluctantly agreed. The studio was freezing. They caked makeup on me, trying to warm up my pale skin and hide the exhaustion, my short hair, which Ari had helped me style into something sharp and intentional. Felt like armor. Gennadi was there. He wasn't in the green room with me, when he wasn't in the control booth, when he was sitting in the dark, empty studio audience, 5 or 6 rows back, just a shadow in a well-cut suit. He wasn't there to protect me. He was there to watch me. The host, a woman with a bright, plastic smile, tried to bait me immediately. "Lila, it's so good to have you. Tell us, what was it like? That moment of violation, it must have been terrifying." "It was clarifying," I said, looking straight into the red light of the camera. It made me realize that thousands of people in this city feel that way every day, in small ways. They get filmed by customers when they don't want to be. They get touched. They get yelled at by people just to get a reaction. That's why we started the Quiet Apron. It's a support network. I used my 3 minutes. I talked about the hotline. I talked about the signs. I talked about dignity. When the interview was over, the host looked profoundly disappointed. Gennadi was waiting by the studio exit. He didn't say "good job." He didn't say anything. He just put his hand on the small of my back as we walked to the car, a silent, steady pressure. His eyes, when they caught the streetlights, were softer than I'd ever seen them. Of course, Bryce couldn't stand it. He was losing the narrative. 2 days later, his video dropped. This wasn't a shaky phone clip. He'd hired a professional editing house. It was a behind-the-scenes cut, a director's cut of the night. He'd somehow gotten security footage, maybe from Peterson, maybe from KTS's own team of me before the spill, looking exhausted, rubbing my temples. He'd edited the audio from his phone, making his voice sound concerned, cutting out the laughter of his friends. The narrative he spun was slick, and it was vicious. I was unstable, I was clumsy, I spilled on him, and then I freaked out. He'd playfully tried to lighten the mood, and I'd overreacted. Seeing a payday, he'd even faked a text message, superimposed on the screen, implying I was looking for fame. He was painting me as a setup artist, a gold digger. My first instinct was to scream, to go online and call him a liar, a monster. Gennady put his hand over mine as I gripped my phone. "Don't fall into his game," he said, his voice calm. "He wants a fight. He wants mud. You're clean. Stay clean." So, I took a different approach. I took my phone. I went down to the promenade, right outside the Halcyon Pavilion. The wind was high, whipping my short hair across my face. I didn't use a filter. I didn't write a script. I just hit record. "My name is Lila Quinn," I said, my voice steady against the sound of the waves. "I am a server. I'm not an actress, and I'm not an opportunist. I didn't want this attention." I paused, letting the wind fill the silence for a second. "But since I have it, I'm going to use it. Respect isn't complicated. Don't film people without their permission. Don't touch people who are just trying to do their job. Don't be cruel. That's it. That's the whole message." I turned the camera from my face to the gray, choppy water of the bay. "This is Port Orpheus. We're better than this." I posted it. It was 1 minute long. I didn't engage with Bryce. I didn't mention his video. I just stated my truth. The video didn't get Bryce's numbers. It didn't break the internet. But it got different numbers. The Quiet Apron hotline got 200 messages in one night. The next day, a large donation came into the nonprofit foundation Ari had set up. $20,000, anonymous. I looked at Gennady. He was reading the Wall Street Journal at the kitchen island. "Was that you?" I asked. "The stock on KTS dipped 3% yesterday," he said, turning the page. "The markets are jittery about their public relations. Our audit also found some very interesting discrepancies in their fuel surcharge declarations. Roman is very thorough." He never answered my question. The real shift happened that Friday. A man named Frank Peterson, no relation to the security guard. Thank God contacted us. He was the local union president for the hotel and hospitality workers. "What you're doing, miss," he said on the phone, his voice gravelly, like stones in a tumbler. "It's what we've been trying to do for years. We've been focused on wages, on benefits. You're focused on dignity. We need to work together. We want to fund your de-escalation training. We want to talk to you about developing a responsible customer course." I was stunned. This was real. This was becoming legitimate. That weekend, I went back to my old diner just to see my old boss and pick up my last check. I was nervous, sitting at the counter in my civilian clothes, my short hair feeling strange. An older woman, maybe 70, sat down 2 stools over. She ordered a coffee. The waitress, a new girl I didn't know, was nervous, her hands visibly shaking. She spilled a little of the coffee into the saucer as she set it down. The girl flinched, her face panicked. "Oh, ma'am, I'm so sorry. Let me get you a new—" The older woman just smiled. She put her hand gently on the girl's arm. "It's just coffee, dear. You're doing fine." She looked over at me. I realized she'd recognized me from the news, not as the victim. As the woman from the Quiet Apron, she just nodded, a small sign of respect, and put her hand over her heart. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. I smiled. It was the first real, genuine smile since the gala. It started in my chest and actually reached my eyes. I realized my voice wasn't a scream in the void. It was a low, calm frequency. It wasn't about making noise. It was about making people stop and listen. That night, I came home. Gennady was working late. Taped to our front door was a simple, handwritten envelope, no stamp. Someone had hand-delivered it. I opened it. The note was on cheap, lined paper, torn from a spiral notebook. "I work at the tavern down in the warehouse district. I saw what you said on the news about respect. I just wanted to say, you're not alone, sister." I held the note for a long time. Then I went to the kitchen and I stuck it on the refrigerator with a round, floral magnet. right next to the small, perfect wedding photo of Gennady and me, his arms around me on a beach a lifetime ago. My two lives, side by side, the foundation of a new kind of trust. The quiet apron was my ground war. Gennady's war was in the air. While I was organizing hotline volunteers and coordinating with Frank Peterson's union, Gennady was moving in a world of encrypted ledgers and fiduciary duty. His data accountants, the forensics team, had delivered their first report. He sat me down at the massive dining table, his laptop open. "You wanted to see the engine," he said. "This is it." It wasn't a list of names. It was a flow chart, a tangle of wires that all led to one small, defunct-looking company, Harbor Drift LLC. "This," he said, tapping the screen, "is the shell company. It was set up 3 months ago. It has one purpose." He clicked. Another screen. Payments. One payment, 2 days before the gala, to a server farm in Eastern Europe. "The bots," I whispered, "for the live stream." "For the bots," he confirmed. "But look at this." He pointed to a second payment, dated a week before that, a bulk purchase from a novelty and party supply wholesaler. The expense line item was content generation tools. "The clippers," I said, my stomach tightening. "And," Gennady said, his voice grim, "this." He clicked again. A payment from KTS, funneling money to Harbor Drift LLC. But it wasn't from KTS's marketing budget. It was from the Sea Glass Initiative, their public-facing charity. "They paid for it with charity money," I said, the sickness rising in my throat. "It gets better," Gennady said, his tone biting. He pulled up a different file. "My legal team, as the landlords of the Halcyon, sent a formal request for transparency in event costs. Per our venue charter, we have a right to audit all third-party expenses authorized on our property. KTS's people are arrogant. They're sloppy. They assumed it was a standard billing query. They sent us the whole file." An email chain appeared on the screen, from Bryce's head of PR to the KTS finance department. Subject: Re-Blue Currents viral strategy. Approved: expense the prank kits under the Sea Glass guest experience budget. We need to increase the unexpected moments for this quarter's viral engagement metrics. Bryce is fully on board. I stared at that phrase, unexpected moments. It wasn't a drunken mistake. It wasn't a joke that went too far. It was a strategy. I was a metric. "Leak it," I said, my voice shaking. "Gennady, send this to every reporter in the city." "No." His answer was immediate, sharp. "If I leak it, it's just a piece of paper. It's slander. It's inadmissible. The chain of custody is broken. A good lawyer would tear it apart." "So what do you do?" "We don't give it to the press," he said, already attaching the file to a new, encrypted email. "We give it to the people who can use it legally." He sent the entire package, raw and unedited, to 2 people. The first was Mara Ionescu. "This is her verification," he said. "She can investigate this as a journalist. It's her lead now." The second went to his chief counsel, Mark. "Mark," he said over the phone, "deliver this by hand to the Metropolitan Integrity Bureau. File it as a formal addendum to our complaint. We are submitting evidence of potential misuse of charitable funds and a conspiracy to create unsafe conditions on our property." He was building a case, brick by brick, following rules I never even knew existed. But he was also moving on another front. For the next 2 days, he was on calls with people who did not sound like lawyers. They had names like Blackwood and Aperture. They weren't his team. They were investment funds. "All I'm saying, gentlemen," I heard him murmur into his headset, his voice the epitome of concerned reason, "is that, as a significant stakeholder in the Port Orpheus waterfront, the Pavilion Trust is growing concerned. The brand risk associated with KTS's recent event management is high. It suggests poor internal controls, poor risk management." He let that phrase hang in the air. Risk management. That was their language. "I just think," he continued smoothly, "that any future KTS-sponsored events in this city, for the protection of all our investments, should perhaps be subject to a new ethics oversight seat, someone to ensure stability. He was flanking them. He wasn't just attacking KTS, he was quietly convincing the other money in the city that KTS was a bad investment, that they were unstable. The tremors started almost immediately. A rumor, cited by an anonymous source on a financial blog, mentioned jitters in KTS's governance. The stock, which had been rock solid, dipped 3 points, then 4. It wasn't a crash, but it was a wobble, and it was enough to make Bryce Kincaid panic. His reaction was exactly as clumsy as Gennady had predicted. He launched a new, massive charity campaign, Kincaid Cares Wigs for Patients. He pledged a huge sum to the cancer wing of the city hospital, complete with a cringeworthy video of himself, looking somber, talking about how hair is a gift. The press, of course, called me. They called the Quiet Apron. They asked if I felt vindicated. They asked if I would be attending the check presentation ceremony with Mr. Kincaid. I looked at the glass box with my hair in it. I thought about the women writing to my hotline. I felt a cold, clear rage. No, I told the Port Orpheus Chronicle. I will not be participating. While I'm sure the patients will appreciate the donation, this campaign doesn't address the systemic issue. Do you have a response for Mr. Kincaid? The reporter pressed. Yes, I said. I would like to publicly invite Mr. Kincaid to attend the Responsible Customer Workshop the Quiet Apron is co-hosting with the Hospitality Union. The first class is next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Bryce responded on his live stream, just as I'd hoped. A class, he scoffed, laughing to his friends. She wants me to go to a class on how to tip. I don't need a class on how to have fun. But for the first time, his audience wasn't laughing with him. The press, which had been treating him like a harmless clown, suddenly smelled his fear. At a press conference for his own wig charity, the first question wasn't about the money. Mr. Kincaid, why won't you attend the workshop? Are you afraid to face service workers in a classroom? Are you saying, another reporter asked, that you're above learning about respect? Bryce stammered, looked like a fish in a dry tank. He got angry, called them fake news, and stormed off the stage. His PR move had just blown up in his face. The next day, the MIBR made its move. It wasn't an arrest. It was quieter. And, as I was learning, far more terrifying. They issued a formal notice of interest. It was a public filing. They were officially requesting KTS provide all documents, emails and internal billing related to the Halcyon Gala and the Sea Glass Initiative. The net was closing. That night, Gennady came home late, and he looked tired but focused. I met someone, Mare, he said, pouring himself a glass of water. Saffron Lee. She's the director of human resources at KTS. My breath caught. An insider. She was there, Gennady said, nodding. She was the one who tried to stop Bryce's PR team before they even brought out the clippers. She argued with them. She sent an email warning them it was a violation of corporate conduct. They told her Bryce had final creative control. She'll testify. She'll do more, Gennady said. He pulled a thumb drive from his pocket. She hates what Bryce is doing to the company she helped build. She just gave me the rest of the Sea Glass budget. It was worse than we thought. The fund wasn't just for bots and prank kits. It was a payroll. KTS had been paying 24 micro-influencers kids with maybe 5 or 10,000 followers to create and spread degrading content, memes about clumsy waitresses, skits about stupid bartenders. A quiet, sustained, systemic campaign to normalize the exact kind of humiliation I had endured. I looked at the file, then at Gennady. You have them. This is it. You can ruin them. You can destroy the whole company. He put his hand over mine, his gaze steady. He was reminding me of his promise. No. Lila, I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in structure. We don't break KTS. We don't put Saffron Lee and 1,000 other decent people out of a job. We're not crushing them. We're retraining them. We are going to use their own rules to force them to change, from the inside out. The dam broke 2 days later. Mara Ionescu's article landed on the front page of the Chronicle's digital edition. It was a masterpiece of clean, objective evisceration. How a charity fund, a shell company, and a PR stunt created a viral moment and a corporate crisis. She didn't slander, she didn't speculate, she just laid out the facts, one after another. Harbor Drift, LLC, the Sea Glass Initiative, the bot farm payments, the prank kit invoice, the Mybers official notice of interest, the 4-point stock dip on governance concerns. She just connected the dots. The entire city finally saw the picture. Bryce, predictable as ever, went nuclear. He was cornered. He couldn't fight the Chronicle on facts, so he went to the tabloids. Bryce Kincaid, my exclusive story, the setup, the lies, the gold digger who's tearing my family apart. I was furious, but Gennady smiled. It was a small, thin, dangerous smile. "Aren't you going to do something?" I demanded. "He just did it for us," Gennady said. "He's loud, he's angry, and he's just confirmed he's the center of the story. Let him have his tabloid tantrum. He thinks he's building a stage. He has no idea we're already building the set." While Bryce was posing for sleazy photographers, an email landed in my inbox. It was from the City Events Committee. The Quiet Apron, as a new community partner with the Hospitality Union, was officially invited to be a keynote speaker at the annual Port Orpheus Harbor Occupation Fair. It wasn't a national news spot, it was a community stage. It was real. I was telling Gennady the good news when he held up a hand, his other phone to his ear. He was speaking quietly, his back to me as he looked out over the bay. "Yes, Harris, that's correct," he said. "The Halcyon Pavilion, a full buyout for the 10th of next month, a gala of recommitment and atonement. Yes, they're aware they will be calling you within the hour to confirm the booking they believe they are making. Just send the standard contract. And Harris, make sure you include the new Dignity Clause addendum." My blood ran cold. He was booking their apology gala. He was forcing them, through his investor channels, to host a public atonement. And he was making them do it at the Halcyon, back at the scene of the crime. Back in his house, the day the Chronicle article dropped, a storm broke over Port Orpheus. Not just a metaphorical one, a real, honest-to-God, late autumn deluge that turned the streets into dark, rushing rivers and the sky into a sheet of bruised purple. I'd been at the Union Hall all afternoon, working with Frank Peterson and Ari, sketching out the framework for the responsible customer workshops. We were high on coffee and the feeling that we were actually building something. By the time I left, at 7 p.m., the city was washing away. The taxi dropped me half a block from our building, and I made a run for it. But it was useless. By the time I got to the private elevator, I was a drowned rat. My secondhand trench coat was soaked through. My jeans were plastered to my legs, and my short hair was slicked to my skull, rainwater dripping into my eyes and down my neck. I was shivering, miserable, and utterly exhausted. The elevator doors opened to the penthouse. It was quiet, warm. The only light came from the city below, a blurred, glittering mess through the rain-lashed windows. Gennady was standing by the entrance to the living room. He was holding my thick, white cashmere robe. He just stood there, watching me drip a puddle onto the polished marble floor. He didn't rush forward. He didn't chide me for being out in the storm. He just held the robe, and his eyes, usually so calm and analytical, were troubled. "Lila," he said, his voice quiet, not moving to hand me the robe. "I'm fine," I stammered, my teeth chattering. "Just a lot of rain." "Am I doing that to you?" he asked. I stopped, halfway through trying to peel off my wet coat, doing what letting me get soaked. "Am I making you feel like this?" he said, his gaze intense. "Like you have to go out and fight your own battles in the storm. I'm running my side of this, the trust. The Mybre, I'm booking the Halcyon for his atonement. I never asked you if that was what you wanted. Am I taking away your choices?" Lila again. The question hit me harder than the wind outside. I let the wet coat drop to the floor with a heavy, sodden thump. I was shaking, and not just from the cold. "Yes," I whispered, and his face tightened. "No, I don't know, Gennady." I walked toward him, leaving wet footprints. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "I'm terrified of what you can do. I watch you on the phone. You move these giant, invisible pieces. You talk about risk management and fiduciary duty and structural change. You're building a cage for him, an elegant, legal, inescapable cage, and that power, it scares the hell out of me. It's the shadow. It's the thing I've always been afraid of." His expression was unreadable. He was just listening. "But then," I continued, my voice finding a little more strength, "then I remember that day at the studio. You were there. You sat in the back of that dark, empty room. You didn't tell me what to say. You didn't correct me. You didn't storm the stage when the host tried to bait me. You just bore witness. You're holding this hurricane, and you're pointing it away from me. You're using it to build a wall so I can have a stage. So yes, I'm scared of the power, but I've never felt safer." He finally stepped forward. He didn't wrap me in the robe. He dropped it on a chair. He raised his hands, slowly, as if not to startle me, and he cupped my face. His palms were warm. "The goal," he said, his voice a low vow, "is dignity. Not for us, for the act. It's not about retaliation to make us feel better. It's about respect, to make the city better." His thumbs brushed the rainwater from my cheekbones. His gaze dropped, and his fingers moved from my face to my hair, my short, ragged, pixie hair. He touched it with a reverence that made my throat close. His fingertips, warm and slightly rough, traced the lines where I had cut it myself, where the clippers had buzzed. He wasn't seeing the damage. He was mapping the new territory. My breath hitched. It was the first time he'd touched my hair since that night. He was overwriting the memory of Bryce's violent grip with this incredible gentleness. My own hands, cold and trembling, came up. I didn't cling to him. I just rested them on his chest, feeling the solid, steady beat of his heart through his shirt. It was an anchor in the storm. "Stay," I whispered, the word barely audible. "Just be here, with me, not the man running the city, just my husband." His eyes closed for a second. When they opened, the planner, the strategist, was gone. There was only Gennady. "Here," he murmured, "with you." He leaned in, and his lips met my forehead, a simple, warm pressure against my cold skin. I leaned into him, burying my face in the hollow of his shoulder, breathing in the scent of his cedar, and clean cotton, and something that was just him. He pulled me against him then, a full body embrace, his arms wrapping around me like steel bands. But it wasn't a cage, it was a fortress. He wasn't holding me down, he was holding me together. I clung to him, my cold, wet body shivering against his warmth, and he just held me, his hand stroking my now very short hair, his breathing deep and even, matching mine, until my shivers began to subside. We stood there for a long time in the dark, with the storm raging outside. It was more intimate than any touch we'd shared in months. It was a silent, mutual agreement, a re-upping of our vows in the face of an attack. I am here. You are here. We are here. After, he ran a hot bath for me, and when I came out, wrapped in the warm robe at last, he was on the sofa, looking out at the rain, which was still lashing the windows. He'd poured 2 glasses of wine. I sat beside him, tucking my feet under me. "Look," I said, holding up my right hand in the dim light. I showed him the calluses, the tough, yellowish skin at the base of my fingers and on my palm. I've had these since I was 16, from working the dinner shift at the old diner. My boss taught me to carry 3 plates on my left arm and 2 in my right hand. I always thought they were ugly, proof that I was just a server. Gennady took my hand. He didn't say they were beautiful. He didn't offer some empty platitude. He just traced them, one by one. Then he turned my hand over and pressed a soft, warm kiss directly into my calloused palm. He held my gaze, then reached up and tugged the collar of his own dark shirt aside, baring his shoulder in the faint gray light from the city. I could see it, a pale, puckered scar about 2 inches long, just above his collarbone. It was old, but it was deep. I reached out, my fingers tracing its tough, leathery edge. "What?" "Tuition," he said, his voice quiet. "Tuition. From a long time ago, a lesson on the price of moving too fast with the wrong people for the wrong reasons. A lesson on the difference between being respected and being feared." He shrugged, pulling the shirt back into place. "The tuition was high, but I learned the lesson." Beep, beep, beep. The sudden, high-pitched, incredibly obnoxious sound shattered the moment. We both jumped. Gennadi's eyes widened. He let out a low groan. "The bread." He bolted from the sofa, ran into the kitchen, and yanked open the oven. A small, acrid cloud of black smoke billowed out. He flapped at it with a towel, then pulled out the baking sheet. On it sat 2 slices of beautiful, artisanal sourdough, now 2 perfect, identical squares of carbon. He looked at the burnt bread. He looked at me, standing in the kitchen doorway. A slow, deeply reluctant, utterly genuine grin spread across his face. I started to laugh. It wasn't a giggle. It was a full-on, doubled-over, tears-in-my-eyes laugh, the kind of laugh that hurts your stomach. This man who could move markets and make CEOs tremble and orchestrate the downfall of a tech empire, he had burnt the toast. He had burnt the bread to a crisp. He tossed the blackened squares into the sink, where they hissed, and he leaned against the counter, laughing with me. The tension of the last 2 weeks, the fear, the anger, the humiliation, it all just broke. Right there, over 2 pieces of charcoal. When we finally calmed down, his expression turned serious again. He walked back over to me. Lila, the gala, the recommitment gala at the Halcyon. My stomach instantly tightened again. "What about it?" "I need to be there," he said. Then he held up a hand, stopping my immediate defensive reaction. "Not as your husband, on your arm. Not as the owner of the trust. On the stage. I need to be backstage. In the control room. Saffron Lee, the HR woman, is our inside line. The union is our community support. I will be our eyes and ears. I will run the tech. I'll be on comms. With you. With Ari. With Frank. If you'll have me. If you want me on your team." He was asking. He wasn't telling me his plan. He wasn't handling it. He was asking to join my team. He was offering to be my backstage crew. I looked at him, the man who bends cities, the man who burns toast. "We go," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Not you for me, not me with you. We go, as a team." He nodded, a look of profound relief on his face. As a team. Later that night, I fell into the deepest sleep I'd had in weeks, the sound of the storm finally lulling me under. I woke up once, hours later, in the dead quiet of 3 a.m. The rain had stopped. Gennadi was fast asleep beside me, his breathing deep and even. His phone was on the nightstand. Stuck to the back of it was one of my yellow sticky notes. He'd written 3 words on it in his sharp, architectural all-caps handwriting. "Respect retaliation." His own private oath. I lay back down, listening to the silence. The storm was over. Outside. The city was clean, washed and waiting. The calm that followed the storm was a brittle, fragile thing. Gennadi and I were a team, but now we were a team preparing for a war. Bryce. Having been publicly humiliated by Mara's article and my refusal to engage with his Whig charity, was no longer just arrogant. He was cornered. And cornered men don't follow rules. He hired a company called Tidespin. I'd never heard of them, but Gennadi knew the name. "They're not a PR firm," he said, his mouth a thin, hard line. "They're a reputation arsonist. They don't spin stories, they burn them down." Tidespin's opening salvo wasn't aimed at the media. It was aimed directly at me. My phone, which I'd finally started to answer again, became a vector for pure poison. It wasn't just comments. It was a targeted spam campaign. My personal cell number, my email. And God help me, our building's address were suddenly circulating on the darkest forums. The bots that KTS had used to inflate their gala views were now being used to destroy my life. I was sitting in the kitchen, trying to coordinate with Frank Peterson about the harbor fair, when the building concierge buzzed the penthouse. "Mrs. Zharkov," he said, his voice strained and formal. "There is a situation in the lobby. I would advise you to stay upstairs. We are handling it." My heart hammered. I ran to the main window, the one that looked down 20 stories to the street. There, on the pristine sidewalk in front of our building, was a group of about 15 people. They weren't just protesters. They were ugly. They carried professionally printed signs. Gold digger, liar, attention whore, fake victim. A man in a baseball cap was shouting into a megaphone, his voice a tiny, distorted squawk from this high up. I felt sick. They were here, at my home. I looked for Gennady's men, the dark suits. They were nowhere. Instead, the building's own security team, in their maroon blazers, were forming a calm, polite line. Gennady appeared at my side, his hand resting on my shoulder. He was perfectly still, just watching. "You're not sending them down," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I gave you my word. Lila," he said, his voice low. "No street-level nonsense. They are on our property. Our building's security will handle them. They are trained for this." He pointed. "Look." A police cruiser, a standard Port Orpheus patrol car, rolled up. The group was loud, but they weren't breaking any laws yet. "They're just going to let them stay." I felt a surge of helpless anger. "No," Gennady said. He was holding his phone. "They are violating Section 51B of the city's municipal code, targeted residential harassment. The police have already been furnished with the evidence that this is not a spontaneous protest, but a paid-for corporate action by Tidespin." As I watched, the officers talked to the building manager, then to the man with the megaphone. It was quiet, firm, no arrests. But 5 minutes later, the group was dispersing, rolling up their signs, looking annoyed. Gennady had used a city ordinance, not a threat. He'd kept his promise. The next attack came an hour later. Ari Mendoza called me, his voice high with panic. "Lila, the Quiet Apron site, it's gone." I typed in the address, 404 not found. "It's a DDoS attack," Ari said, the sound of frantic typing in the background. "Someone is flooding our server with millions of junk requests. I can't stop it." Before I could even respond, my other line buzzed. It was Saffron Lee, the KTS executive. "Lila," she said, her voice crisp, "I just saw the traffic spike. This is a KTS signature. They did this to a rival tech blog last year. Tell your friend Ari to check his firewall logs. He's looking for a vulnerability in the PHP gateway. I'm sending him a patch I developed. It should block their specific botnet signature." Ari and Saffron, two people who had never met, worked for 10 minutes straight, a flurry of texts and technical jargon I didn't understand. And then the site flickered back online. Gennady, who had been listening on speaker, hung up his own call. "The ASC is very interested in this," he said, a cold satisfaction in his voice. "This new attack, combined with the Harbor Drift payments for the last botnet, shows a pattern. They are now actively investigating KTS for criminal corporate sabotage." The attacks were failing. Bryce was getting more desperate, and then he did something incredibly, profoundly stupid. He called me directly. My phone rang, an unknown number. I answered, thinking it was Ari. "Hello? You think you're so smart, don't you?" The voice, oily, smug, instantly recognizable. My blood froze. I couldn't speak. "You and your handler," Bryce spat. "You think you can ruin me? You're just a waitress. You're nothing. You're going to that Harbor Fair, aren't you? You think you're a big shot. You just watch yourself. I'll see you at the harbor. Lila, and I promise you'll regret it." The line clicked dead. I was paralyzed, the phone still pressed to my ear. My whole body was vibrating. It was a direct threat. Gennady took the phone from my unresisting hand. He was holding his own phone. He hadn't been making a call. He had been recording. He pressed save, typed a short, one-sentence email, attached the audio file, and hit send. "To who?" I whispered. "The me breath," he said. "Detective Miller. That was felony witness intimidation." That night, the escalation I had been dreading finally came, but not at our home. Gennadi's head of security for the pavilion, Harris, called at 2 a.m. Mr. Zharkov, we have a situation at the Halcyon, storage unit 4B. No fire, but a lot of smoke. Gennadi didn't just take me. He insisted I come. You need to see the response. Lila, you need to see how we handle this. The storage unit smelled like sulfur and chemicals. A heavy-duty smoke bomb, the kind used for special effects, had been set off inside, ruining thousands of dollars in linens. It wasn't designed to burn the building down. It was designed to terrorize. The cameras, sir, Harris said, pointing to a monitor. The footage was grainy, but clear. A figure in a dark hoodie, their face covered by a cartoon whale mask. KTS's official corporate mascot. The figure ran to a waiting car. The camera caught the plate. It's a rental, Harris said, his voice grim. We've already traced it. It was leased to the same third-party event company KTS used for the gala, the one that bought the Clippers. One of Gennadi's personal team, a man I'd never seen before, stepped forward. Sir, give me 2 hours. I'll find the driver. No. Gennadi's voice was absolute. It stopped the man cold. You will do nothing. You will not pursue. You will not find anyone. He turned to Harris. You will copy this footage. You will give the original and the rental car receipt to the MIBR. This is their case now. Our response, he said, turning back to his man, is security. Double the patrols, authorize the new camera installs, and effective immediately. KTS's recommitment gala will have a new security addendum. My team, not theirs, will run the perimeter. They will pay for it. He didn't hit back. He just built a higher, stronger, and more expensive wall. It was the final piece the MIBR needed, the threat, the fire, the contract from Saffron. The next morning, they raided the offices of Tidespin. They didn't just find the botnet contracts, they found the master document, the official contract with KTS, signed by Bryce's PR head. It authorized Tidespin to create strong emotional moments to redirect the public narrative. A phrase so vague, it was a legal confession to illicitly advertising and coordinating the harassment campaign. The city council, which ran the Harbor Occupation Fair, acted immediately, citing the MIBR raid. They formally disinvited Bryce Kincaid from attending at all. Even as a guest, he was officially too toxic. I was at the Union Hall when the news broke. Frank Peterson clapped me on the shoulder. You got him, kid. He's out. But I knew Bryce. Being disinvited from my event would be the ultimate insult. He responded that same afternoon, a massive, professionally produced press conference. He stood in front of a KTS banner, his face a mask of false sincerity. I am heartbroken by this misunderstanding, he said. My attempts to apologize have been railroaded, so I am taking matters into my own hands. On the 10th at the Halcyon Pavilion, I will be hosting the Kincaid Recommitment Gala. A night of truth, apology, and atonement. I will apologize. For real. My way. Ari called me. He's insane. He's forcing an apology gala at the scene of the crime. No, I said, looking at an email Gennadi had just forwarded me. He's not forcing it. He's being herded. It was the contract. The Halcyon was the only venue big enough, with the right prestige, available on such short notice. KTS's board, desperate to stop the stock bleed, was forcing him to do it. And he had to sign. He had to sign the new Pavilion Trust Dignity Clause Addendum, a clause that gave the venue final cut on all programming and the right to interrupt any event that violates the personal, physical, or psychological dignity of staff or guests. That night, a plain envelope was messengered to the penthouse. Inside was a single document, the full event program for the Recommitment Gala. Saffron had sent it. I scanned the schedule. Welcome drinks, dinner, Bryce's keynote apology, and then, at 9:30 p.m., the final event, healing the rift in audience interaction. My blood turned to ice. It was a trap. He's going to do it again, I whispered to Gennadi. He's going to bring someone on stage. He's going to reenact it. He's going to call it just a joke and try to make the audience laugh with him. Yes, Gennadi said. He was already dialing his phone. He is. So we're going to be ready. We called it the anchor plan. The next day, our living room was a command center. Me, Gennady, Mara Ionescu, her reporter's notebook open, a very stern, very quiet liaison from the Mybrar, and Harris, the Halcyon manager, looking terrified but resolute. We mapped the entire night. Gennady was right. He would run the backstage. A 9-split screen showing every camera feed, a direct line to his legal team, who would be watching a live feed, ready to file injunctions. Mara would be in the press pit, ready to release Saffron's other documents the second Bryce went off script. The MIBR would have 2 plainclothes officers in the room, as guests, to monitor for breach of the peace. And me, I was the anchor. That night, I went to my closet. I ignored the fancy dresses Gennady had bought me. I pulled out a simple, sleeveless black dress, high-necked, severe, clean. I called my stylist and had her come over. The bob, I said, sharper, make the edges perfect. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't waiting for a fake apology. I was going to edit the end of this story myself. The night before the gala, my phone lit up. It was a notification. Bryce had posted a new story. It was him, in his penthouse, a smirk on his face. He was stroking a new pair of clippers. Sleek, silver, professional. The caption, just kidding, or am I, see you tomorrow. The post exploded. The city was furious. Gennady just looked at the post, then at me. He just armed us. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. My hair was sharp as glass. I was ready. 24 hours to go. We arrived at the Halcyon Pavilion through the same service entrance I had fled from. This time, I wasn't in a cheap polyester uniform. I was in a simple black dress, my hair so sharp it felt like a helmet. I was walking beside my husband. The main hall was a sea of nerves. KTS had been forced to invite not just their own people, but city officials, major investors, and a full press corps. The blue LEDs from the Blue Currents Gala were gone, replaced with a supposedly sincere, warm amber light. Gennady walked me through the layout, center stage, just like last time, he said, his voice low, his hand on the small of my back. 2 main LED screens, here and here. They're controlled by Bryce's tech team, but our system is patched in. I have the override. He pointed to the media pit where Mara Ionescu was already setting up her laptop, looking all business. Then he gestured to a roped-off area near the stage. Saffron's intel was right. That's his interaction zone. He's got a special camera crew just for it. He's planning to make a spectacle. My stomach turned. It was the exact spot where he had grabbed my hair. Let's go backstage, he said, guiding me away from the growing crowd in the main lobby. I saw Ari and Frank Peterson setting up a simple table with a small Quiet Apron banner. They were handing out informational pamphlets to guests as they arrived. They weren't protesting. They were presenting a solution. The backstage area was a different world. It was a small, windowless office that Harris, the manager, had converted into Gennady's command center. A bank of 9 screens showed every angle of the hall, the stage, the crowd, the doors, the press pit, the interaction zone. This is the anchor plan, Gennady said, his team of 2 tech specialists already in place. His chief counsel, Mark, was on a laptop in the corner, a live legal watch. The moment Bryce brings out those clippers, or anything like them, Gennady said, his eyes on the monitors, Harris, who's on the podium by the soundboard, will invoke the dignity clause. That cuts Bryce's microphone and gives us a mandatory 90-second pause for a venue safety announcement. Simultaneously, Mara's voice came over the comms system from the press pit. The MIBR's press liaison will hit send on the formal statement confirming the raid on Tidespin and the investigation into the Sea Glass Fund. Gennady nodded. The press will get that notification on their phones just as Mara's video feed goes live. She has a hard patch. The moment my team hits this button, her 3-minute documentary, the one with the anonymous server stories, plays on both main screens. And me, I asked, my voice sounding small. Harris's safety announcement will simply be him introducing you, Gennady said. You'll be the one to read the statement. You're not the manager. Lila, you're the anchor. I picked up the simple, black wireless microphone. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The noise from the hall was a dull, terrifying roar. All those people, all those cameras, waiting. "He'll interrupt," I whispered, my throat dry. "He'll rush the stage. He'll deny everything." "I hope he does," Gennady said, his voice cold. He tapped one of the screens. "If he moves on you, my techs are already instructed to switch the feed from his face to the wide angle. It makes him look small and frantic, and if he denies the plan..." He tapped another keyboard. This email, the Unexpected Moments email, which the MI bar has cleared for public release, it goes right onto both LED screens, right over his head. A quiet knock. Saffron Lee peeked in, her face pale but determined. "We're in place," she said quietly. "I've got 24 KTS employees who are as sick of this as I am. Scattered in the front 10 rows. They're our inside team. When Bryce's friends try to laugh or jeer, my people will start the applause, the right kind of applause." I felt the panic rising. My lungs were too small. The black dress felt like a shroud. I was going to be sick. Gennady saw it. He put his hands on my shoulders, turning me away from the screens. He was close, his gaze holding mine. "Breathe with me, Lila," he said, his voice cut through the noise. "In for 4, hold for 7, out for 8. I did it. Twice. The roaring in my ears began to fade. The sharp, specific fear began to morph into a dull, heavy weight. "This is a lot to ask," he said, his voice so quiet only I could hear. "This is my plan, my stage, but you are the one who has to walk onto it. If you want to stop, we stop. Right now, I will walk you out of that service door. We will get in the car, and we will go home. We will find another way." I looked at him, at the man who had burned toast and built empires, the man who had offered me a way out. And I thought of the note on my fridge. "You're not alone, sister." I shook my head. "No, he doesn't get to win. He doesn't get to make me run again." I took a deep, steadying breath. The 4-7-8 rhythm now my own. "I'm staying." "Good," he said, a ghost of a smile. "My hand will be on this control board. I am with you, every step." A voice crackled over the comms. "Opening act is finished. Lights down for keynote." Gennady squeezed my shoulder, once. "Showtime." I walked to the edge of the stage wing, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. The lights in the hall went down. A single, bright white spotlight hit the center stage, and Bryce Kincaid walked out. He was wearing a ridiculously expensive suit, no tie, his top 2 buttons undone. He looked tanned, relaxed. He was holding a microphone, and he grinned at the crowd, a picture of charming, roguish apology. "Wow," he said, his voice booming over the sound system. Thank you. It's been a crazy couple of weeks. A lot of misunderstandings, a lot of sensitive people." A few of his friends, right in the front row, laughed and clapped. "I'm here," he said, "to apologize, to atone. But first, to clear the air. I want to show you all it was just a joke. It was a prop, so, for a little warm-up." He reached into his jacket pocket, and he pulled out the clippers. They were covered in silver glitter. He held them up high, grinning at the press pit. Click! The entire hall was plunged into harsh, unforgiving white light, the maintenance lights, the same ones from that first night. Bryce froze, blinded, his smile faltering. A new voice. Harris's boomed over the PA system, cutting Bryce's mic. Per the dignity clause of the Halcyon Pavilion venue contract, this program is immediately suspended. All event activities promoting or trivializing the humiliation of staff are in violation of our terms. The crowd gasped, a wave of confused murmuring. Bryce, enraged, tapped his useless microphone. "What the hell, turn it back on!" "And now," Harris's voice continued, "a statement from the community. Please welcome Lila Quinn." This was it. My cue. I walked out of the darkness and into the white light. I was not shaking. I held the microphone and I walked past Bryce, ignoring him, until I was center stage. I looked at the cameras. I looked at the crowd. "We choose respect," I said, my voice clear and amplified, as the language of this city. "I'll get her off the stage," Bryce roared, his voice hoarse, but he was too far from a live mic. He lunged for me, to grab my microphone, to make his joke. He was fast, but Gennady was faster. The instant Bryce moved, the two massive LED screens on either side of the stage, which had been showing his face, flickered. They didn't show the wide angle. They showed the documents. On the left, the Harbor Drift LLC invoice for promotional prank kits. On the right, the Tidespin contract, with the words, "Create strong emotional moments to redirect the public narrative," highlighted in red. Bryce stopped in his tracks, staring at the evidence, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. In the press pit, I saw Mara Ionescu hit a key on her laptop. The screens changed again. My face, not my real face, but a blurred, anonymous silhouette. My voice, digitally altered. My hands were shaking when I spilled that drink. And then another blurred face, a hotel maid. He filmed me bending over. Another, a line cook. They sent it back 3 times, just to get a reaction. Mara's 3-minute documentary was playing. The room was dead silent. Every investor, every city official, every reporter was watching. I looked out, over the sea of stunned faces, and I saw her. A young woman in the Halcyon uniform, standing by the back service door, a tray of water glasses clutched in her hand. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, and as she watched, she whispered one word. "Thank you." I knew then, with an absolute certainty that filled my bones, this was not my story anymore. I glanced into the wings. I could just see him, Gennady, standing in the shadows, his hand on his cufflink, his eyes locked on me. He was completely still. He was letting the scene play. He was keeping his promise. This moment was mine. The 3-minute documentary ended. The screens went dark. The only sound in the massive, white-lit hall was the echo of the last server's voice. Bryce Kincaid, who'd been frozen in place, staring at the evidence of his own corporate malfeasance, finally snapped. "Lies," he roared, and he didn't have a live microphone, but his voice was raw with panic. "It's all a lie, doctored faked their fakes." He pointed at me, his hand shaking. "She's a plant. This is a corporate hit job." "It is not." The new voice was calm, official, and amplified. It came from the side aisle. A man in a simple gray suit was walking toward the stage, holding a microphone. I recognized him from the Anchor Plan meeting, Detective Miller, from the Metropolitan Integrity Bureau. He wasn't in uniform. He didn't have handcuffs. He looked like an accountant. He stepped up onto the low stage, standing a few feet away from me. He didn't look at Bryce. He addressed the press pit. "Detective Miller, my brar," he said, his voice void of all emotion. "To confirm, as of 10:30 a.m. this morning, our Bureau, in partnership with the Atlantic Securities Commission, executed a warrant and has taken possession of the complete data from the firm known as Tidespin. The documents you see on those screens are accurate. A bomb had gone off, a quiet, legal bomb. The press pit erupted, cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. Bryce was trapped. The legal avenue was closed. The media avenue was closed. So he turned on the only person left. Me? He stormed across the stage until he was standing right in front of me. So close I could smell the expensive cologne and the sour sweat of his panic. He was taller than me, his face red and contorted. "You," he spat, his voice a low, furious hiss, for me and the front row to hear. "Who the hell are you?" "You're a 24-year-old nobody. A clumsy waitress. Who are you to stand up here and lecture me?" I stood my ground. I didn't flinch. I held his gaze. "She's the person you forgot was a person." Gennady's voice. It came from just behind me. He hadn't been in the wings. He'd been on the stage, in the shadows, the whole time. He moved to stand directly at my shoulder, a solid, unmovable wall. He didn't take my microphone. He didn't look at Bryce. He just stood beside me, a silent, ironclad statement of support. Bryce recoiled, as if he'd walked into a live wire. He finally recognized the man who owned the building. He looked from Gennady to me and back, the confused, dawning horror in his eyes. He finally understood. "You," he stammered, "you too—" "It doesn't matter who she is to me," Gennady said, his voice still quiet, but it carried, "It matters what you did." It was a joke," Bryce shrieked, desperate now, playing to the crowd. "It was just hair." I raised my microphone. My voice was steady. It didn't shake. "It wasn't just hair. Mr. Kincaid, it was my scalp. It was the feeling of cold metal scraping my skin. It was the heat of your laughter. It was a coldness in my bones when I realized hundreds of people were watching, and no one, not one, would stop you." I paused, and my free hand went up to my own short hair, my hair, the hair I had cut. "You took my hair," I said, my voice ringing with a clarity that silenced the room. "But you didn't get to take my identity. I went home, and I took the shears, and I cut the rest of it myself. I am the one who decided what I look like. I took that power back from you. You don't get to have it." A sob came from the front rows. It wasn't just one. Saffron Lee, her face pale, stepped out of the crowd and walked to the edge of the stage. "He's lying," she called out, her voice shaking but strong. "I'm Saffron Lee, KTS Director of Human Resources. I saw the emails. I have the emails. I told them not to do it. I told them it was a violation." "Me too," another voice. "A young man in a KTS marketing polo. I was on the media team. We were forced they had a quota for disruptive moments. That's what they called them. It was just humiliating people for clicks. The narrative wasn't just breaking, it was shattering. Bryce did the only thing he could. He ran. He didn't run off the stage. He ran back to his one safe space, his interaction zone. The little roped-off area he had designed for his grand finale. He grabbed the microphone on the podium there, the one for his audience participation. "Music," he screamed into it. "Cut their mics, play the music. It's my party. Play the—" The microphone was dead. The speakers were silent. He slammed his hand on the play button on the tech board. Nothing. The system was locked. Gennady had given him the stage, but he had kept control of the house, the venue's rules, the dignity clause, had won. Bryce looked at the dead tech, his face a mask of utter impotence. He saw the glitter-covered clippers, still sitting on the podium, his failed prop. With a primal scream of pure, childish rage, he grabbed them, and he threw them. He threw them at the main LED screen, right at the image of the MIBR's official notice. The clippers hit the screen with a pathetic thwack and clattered to the floor. Time stopped. In an instant, 4 men from the Halcyon security team, Gennady's men, in their discreet dark suits moved. They didn't run. They didn't tackle. They didn't yell. They just stepped in. They formed a calm, professional semicircle between Bryce and the front row. They didn't touch him. They just created a barrier, a soft, inescapable circle of control. Bryce was panting, his chest heaving, trapped between the stage, the dead tech, and the silent wall of security. Gennady watched him. He watched him for a long, cold 10 seconds. He let him stand there, exposed, in the harsh white light. Then, Gennady turned. He turned his back on Bryce Kincaid. He looked at me. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were holding mine, and in front of the entire city, in front of the cameras, the investors, and the man who had assaulted me. He asked me the final question. "What do you want me to do, Lila?" The power, the entire crushing weight of his power, he had just handed it to me. I could tell him to destroy this man. I could tell him to have him arrested. I could tell him to throw him into the street. The choice was mine. I took a breath. I felt the gaze of the young waitress by the service door. I felt the weight of the note on my fridge. "You're not alone." "No one touches him," I said, my voice firm. "He doesn't get to be a martyr. He doesn't get to be dragged out." I turned, and I faced Bryce. I walked to the edge of the stage, so I was looking down at him. "He will listen," I said. "Mr. Kincaid, you wanted to apologize. Now is your chance. Start with them." I pointed, not at me. I pointed at the Halcyon staff, the bartenders, the servers, the security who were lined up along the back wall. watching. Start with the Halcyon staff for what you did in their house, then apologize to the KTS staff. I pointed at Saffron for forcing them to be complicit, then apologize to the city for polluting it with this cruelty. Every camera, every phone, every eye in the room swiveled from me to him. Trapped, there was no escape. He looked at the security team. He looked at Gennady. He looked at the investors in the front row. He stammered. The microphone on the podium clicked back on. Gennady had given him his voice back. Bryce Kincaid, the man who lived for the camera, the man who built his brand on loud, smug confidence, was speechless. He was a boat that had run out of gas, the tide pulling him out to sea. He opened his mouth, but only a dry, rattling sound came out. His ego, his entire public persona, had just collapsed. "Mr. Kincaid," a new voice called out. A man in an expensive suit, sitting in the front row, stood up. One of the investors Gennady had been talking to. The Atlantic Securities Commission just announced the formation of an event sponsorship ethics committee for Port Orpheus. All experience budgets will now be subject to a full public audit. Another man stood up. And until KTS signs the Pavilion Trust's dignity clause for its entire system, not just this venue, my fund is pulling its capital, effective immediately. The pressure had shifted. It wasn't a threat of violence. It was a condition of reform. Bryce just stared, his face ashen. I turned back to the crowd, back to the cameras. "There is no ending tonight," I said, my voice filling the hall. "We don't get to tear him down and go home. This isn't a show. This is a commitment from KTS, from the venues, from all of us, to do better." Silence. Then, one person, Saffron Lee, she started to clap, a slow, rhythmic, deliberate clap. Then Ari and Frank from the back, then the servers, then the investors. It wasn't the wild applause of a show. It was a slow, rolling, powerful wave of agreement, a consensus. I looked back into the shadows. Gennady was still there. By the edge of the stage, he hadn't moved, and for the first time, I saw it. A faint, almost imperceptible smile, a small lifting at the corner of his mouth. He saw me looking. He gave me a single, slow nod, and then he just stepped back. He receded into the shadows, leaving me alone in the white light. He had built the stage. He had run the tech, and now he was letting me have it. The cameras weren't on me anymore. They were zoomed in tight on Bryce Kincaid. He had collapsed into a front row chair, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. He wasn't the storyteller anymore. He was just the subject. Then, the two massive LED screens, which had been holding the KTS documents, changed one last time. They faded to a simple, clean, white background in black text. They read, "The Quiet Apron Support Hotline, 555-212 Respect Myber Witness, Portal Porpheus Integrity, Gov Submit." The action after the climax, the tools for the commitment, the show was over. The work was beginning. The aftermath wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a tide change, slow and irreversible. 2 weeks after the Gala of Recommitment, or the Apology Gala, as the press had gleefully nicknamed it, the tremors finally settled. Kincaid Thermal Systems did not collapse. Gennady had been true to his word. He wasn't interested in simple destruction, the KTS board. In a marathon 8-hour emergency session, had formally signed the Pavilion Trust's dignity clause for their entire corporate event portfolio, system-wide. Tidespin, the reputation arsonists, were not so lucky. The Mybers' evidence, combined with Saffron's internal documents, was enough for a civil court to act. They were banned from operating in the city of Port Orpheus for 5 years, a corporate death sentence. The MIBR and the ASC released their joint report. It was a masterpiece of cold, legal precision. There would be no dramatic criminal charges against Bryce for the gala itself. That would have been a long, messy, personal fight. Instead, the bureaus levied a series of staggering administrative penalties against KTS for the marketing campaign. The final report cited the systemic intentional activation of public humiliation for the purposes of manufactured viral engagement. They had punished the strategy, not just the act. Overnight, the Halcyon Pavilion became the unlikely center of a national conversation. The dignity clause became a new standard. Harris, the manager, was suddenly giving interviews to trade publications about ethical event management. The Halcyon was a model. A week later, I stood on a different stage, not one of high gloss and LED screens, but a simple plywood platform at the Port Orpheus Harbor Occupation Fair. The crowd wasn't investors. It was longshoremen, baristas, hotel maids, and chefs, all mingling under a gray, windy sky. I held the microphone, and I looked out at the faces. Ari and Frank Peterson were standing right in front, Ari giving me 2 thumbs up. "My name is Lila Quinn," I said, my voice carrying over the wind. "I've worked in diners, and I've worked in galas, and I've learned one thing. No one is a prop. No one's humiliation is content. Your server, your bartender, your janitor. They are not the unexpected moments in your marketing plan. They are the essential workers in our city's life." I told them about the Quiet Apron, and I announced that, thanks to a partnership with the Hospitality Union, we were expanding. We were launching 3 new dedicated hotlines, funded by a new community grant. We were offering our first responsible employer training course, teaching managers how to de-escalate aggressive customers and how to have their employees' backs. Gennady made his own announcement the same day. He didn't do a press conference. He just released a statement. He had established the Safe Harbor Fund. It was a new, independent foundation, seeded with a significant portion of the Pavilion Trust's annual profits. Its sole purpose was to provide legal aid scholarships and mental health counseling for any service or hospitality worker in Port Orpheus who had faced abuse or harassment on the job. He was turning his house's winnings into a permanent shield for everyone else. And Bryce. His fate was the most Port Orpheus ending of all. He wasn't in jail. That would have been too simple. The KTS board, in their desperate move for survival, had formally terminated his employment as Global Experience Ambassador. He was out. But the civil court, citing the Mybers report on the Tidespin harassment campaign and his direct recorded threat to me, had mandated community service, 100 hours of it. I found out where, and I had to see it for myself. I went to the first Responsible Customer workshop, co-hosted by the Quiet Apron and the Union. I didn't announce myself. I just stood in the back of the stuffy community center classroom. He came in late, wearing a baseball cap pulled low, and slid into a seat in the very back row. He looked small. He looked tired. And as Ari Mendoza stood at the front, talking about the human cost of a harmless joke, Bryce Kincaid sat there, quietly, and took notes. A few nights later, the wind was quiet. The city was still. "Come with me," Gennady said, his voice soft. He took me to the Halcyon. It was late, maybe 11 p.m. The halls were empty, the vast ballroom dark, lit only by the warm, amber ghost lights they left on for the overnight crew. Harris, the manager, was waiting for us. He wasn't wringing his hands anymore. He just smiled. "Mrs. Zharkov," he said, nodding to me. He held out a single, new key on a simple brass ring. "Mr. Zharkov had this prepared. It's one of the small management offices, the one overlooking the bay. We took the liberty of putting a sign on the door." He led me to it, a simple, frosted glass door. On it, in clean, black letters, it said the Quiet Apron Studio, Office 1, A. A headquarters, a home base, right here, in the heart of the pavilion. "I'll leave you two," Harris said, giving Gennady a nod. We were alone, just me and Gennady, in the middle of the massive, silent, amber-lit ballroom where it had all begun. The ghosts of that night were everywhere. The memory of the laughter, the flashbulbs, the buzz. Gennady didn't say anything. He just held out his hand. I took it. He drew me to the center of the marble floor, right where table 12 had been. and he just held me. One hand found my waist, the other gently took my hand. There was no music, just the faint, distant hum of the city outside, the sound of the waves on the pier. And we danced. A slow, simple, 3-step sway. His movements were sure, steady. I leaned my head against his chest, hearing the solid, calm beat of his heart. He moved. His hand shifting from my waist, he placed his warm, broad palm on my shoulder blade, his other hand still holding mine. It was the exact gesture he'd made that first night, the moment he'd stepped out of the cold, the moment he'd draped his cashmere shawl over my shoulders. But this was different. That had been a shield. This was an embrace. It wasn't protection. It was possession. In the best way. It was peace. I looked up. He was already looking down at me. He lowered his head. Not to kiss me, but just to rest his forehead against mine. We stood there, in the middle of the empty hall, just breathing each other's air. "I love the way you step back," I whispered, my voice thick, "when you know I need to step forward." His eyes closed. "And I love the way you pull me back from the edge," he murmured, his voice a low vibration against my skin. "When I want to jump." I knew exactly what he meant. The tuition, the scar, the old rage. He pulled back, just enough to look at me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out that little yellow sticky note. Respect retaliation. It was worn. The edges curled from being in his wallet. He took my hand, and we walked out of the ballroom, down the hall to our new office. He didn't use the key. He just opened the door, and using his thumb, he pressed the note to the clean, frosted glass, right under the name of the quiet apron. He was making his private oath a public mission. Mara Ionescu's book came out a month later. It wasn't a tell-all. It was a slim, thoughtful, hardcover volume. It was called The City That Learned to Say Sorry. The dedication was one sentence. For Lila, who showed us how to turn a cut into a horizon line. The Quiet Apron studio officially opened the first week of December. It wasn't a gala. We just opened the doors, and they came. Baristas, cooks, maids, servers. They brought coffee and donuts. They brought stories. But they weren't the whispered, fearful stories from the Backroom Voices forum. They were loud. They were networking. They were laughing. The sound of their laughter filled the hallway, echoing out into the grand marble lobby of the Halcyon. I was in the middle of talking to Frank Peterson when the laughter died down. A strange, sudden hush fell over the room. I turned. Bryce Kincaid was standing in the doorway. He wasn't in a suit. He was in jeans and a simple gray sweater. He looked thin. He looked normal. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't smirking. He just looked awkward and deeply out of place. He didn't try to enter. He didn't make a speech. He just looked at me. Across the room, he stepped forward just inside the door and placed something on the reception desk Ari was manning. It was a glass box, identical to mine, inside, resting on a bed of black velvet, was a single pair of sleek silver clippers. Taped to the top of the box was a simple, white envelope. He looked at me, gave a short, jerky nod, and then turned and walked away. No cameras, no press, he just left. I walked over to the desk. My hands were shaking, just a little. I opened the envelope. It was a single card, to remind me never to forget. It wasn't signed. I looked at the box, at the weapon, the artifact of my humiliation, now presented as an artifact of his. Ari looked at me. "You want me to throw this in the harbor?" "Lila, I will. I'll do it right now." I thought for a long moment. I thought about the rage, the fear, the cold. "No," I said. "Bring me the box from the penthouse." That night, I placed them side by side on the shelf in the studio. My box, with the lock of my own black hair, and his box, with the silver clippers. 2 artifacts, 2 testaments, one to the dignity I had reclaimed, one to the lesson he had been forced to learn. Later, much later, Gennady and I went to the roof. The Halcyon had a private rooftop terrace, a place for owners, not for guests. The wind was high. whipping off the bay, tasting of salt and cold. It tugged at my short hair, the hair I had come to love. It was me. I looked down at Port Orpheus, the glittering, complicated, beautiful, brutal city. It was just lights. It wasn't laughing. Gennady came to stand beside me. He didn't put his coat over my shoulders. I wasn't cold. He just reached out. He took my hand, his fingers laced with mine, his calloused palm, the one I knew so well, against my calloused palm. He wasn't shielding me. He wasn't protecting me. He was just with me. And we stood there, together, anchored, as the city breathed below. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. Please, drop a comment below and let's all share our thoughts. And if you enjoyed this, I would be so grateful if you'd subscribe to the channel, Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and maybe even hit that hype button. It helps more than you know, and it ensures these stories get heard by so many more people.